So the ambulance gets you over to the hospital, and then what happens when you get over there?
You know how when we're talking to people about it when they're planning home births and we're like, it's not like you see in the movies. Like you're still going to have intake time. The ambulance is going to take some time to get there. That was not my experience. Like my experience at the hospital until like 2 hours after I woke up from the surgery would have been an episode of Grey's Anatomy. Like they charged the door. Like the ambulance drivers, at one point, the ambulance driver told my midwife to shut the F up.
Can we go back to pregnant woman
Yeah.
launches herself into the ambulance? Your midwife ended up in there.
Yes. She hopped into the front seat with the laptop that they had been taking all my notes, pen and paper, and then transferring them into a laptop. So she hopped into the ambulance passenger seat with her laptop. I was in the back of the ambulance with John. If I can remember correctly, the paramedic was trying to ask me questions and she kept answering them. So, like, he'd be like, "When's the last time you felt the baby move?" And she would start out answering. And he'd ask questions and she'd start answering. And then there was something that, like, she should have known. She didn't know. And he was like, "You don't even know that? Shut the F up." And, like, just, but we were only in the ambulance for 4 minutes. So it was very, very, very rapid. And like the gurney, they push it off the ambulance, slam it into the doors of the hospital, and it's literally a team of doctors, masks already on, that charged the door. They had like an ultrasound tech who was there pushing the like wheelie ultrasound machine. And as they're getting me into the elevator, they're doing ultrasounds on me. It was all alarmingly fast. And not one thing I can say is that my midwife got a lot of disrespect from people that day.
So when you got in there, were you taken right into the OR? Did they assess you in another room or just go straight to the OR?
My memories are kind of foggy of the situation. I remember, I think a lot of the assessments happened like in the elevator and on the way to the OR, because I don't remember being anywhere else other than I remember them closing a curtain and me saying something to the doctor about like if the baby's okay, make sure you bring. I was very concerned because my fiance and I aren't married and we were just boyfriend and girlfriend at the time. So I was very concerned that like without him being like my legal next of kin, that like I didn't want him to have any issues getting to the baby. And so I want like that was my concern right before they put me under was like if the baby's okay, make sure you give him. His dad is John out in the hallway. The baby goes to John. And I just remember like the curtain closing and saying that and then them laying me down and there was just so much commotion. There was like I was everything was happening to me all at once. And it was like the most well-oiled machine I've ever seen in my life. It's like not even one anesthesiologist's hand bumped into a nurse's hand while they were nothing. They were just like shh, everything was done. I know the one thing that was difficult was the nurse. And now me and this nurse have had a lot of interaction since then. We don't know each other like personally and privately, but she's come and seen me every time that I've had a baby afterwards and come to like meet the baby. Because she still works for the hospital and she's a veteran nurse. Like she's got to be close to retirement now. And she had a very hard time getting my IVs stuff. Like I remember the last thing that had to be done was finally getting an IV in my arm. And like as soon as it was done, anesthesia. What am I trying to say? The anesthesiologist had the mask on my like things were starting. But not being able to like get a vein, it was all rapid, very rapid.
So did they put you under for the C-section?
Yeah, I had to be under general anesthesia.
Do you remember waking up from it?
I don't remember waking up from it. I just remember when I realized I was awake. And I know that that was like, I had been awake for a little while before I like came to the sense of being awake. I know when I first opened my eyes and started coming to, um, there was a doctor in the room with me. And according to her, I just woke up like as my mouth started moving before my eyes started opening, kind of thing, which is, I think we all know, is not surprising of me. Um, but I just started mumbling, I'm sorry, and I'm not strong enough. I think that that's a culmination because I remember the two thoughts that were like looped on my brain before I realized I was awake. And it was them constantly, anytime my mom or John asked if I should go to the hospital, they would just equate whatever was happening to another labor that had happened. Somebody else had the same doubts and fears, and then the baby came flying out. Um, and they would always say, as long as she's strong enough, as long as she's strong enough to overcome the contractions, she is perfectly good to be here. So I had that kind of playing on loop, as well as there was an immediate sense of remorse for the people who took care of us in the hospital that like developed before I was even under the anesthesia, because I remember vividly as they're getting me ready for the surgery, there's these three women, and I don't know if they were nurses or doctors or ultrasound techs, but they had the ultrasound machine, and it's like the three of them were like fighting to find his heartbeat. Like they just kept being like getting impatient with each other, where it's like, if you can't find it, let me try. If you can't find it, let me try. And I just remember the look of disappointment that kept waving over their face, and they kept finding a way to be hopeful, and then it would wash away, and finding a way to be hopeful, and it would wash away. And I just remember so vividly, um, before even being put under general anesthesia, like it was just the magnitude of my decision to deliver outside of a hospital, and the wave of grief and remorse and pain that was going to follow not just me and my family, but like all of these souls who I had never come into contact with, who were now going to be haunted by whatever they were about to see, whatever they were about to pull out of my body. So, like, waking up from general anesthesia, I just kept being like, you're not strong enough and you ruined these people's lives. And that was like my thought. And so I guess I just kept repeating, I'm sorry and I'm not strong enough.
Afterward, was it John there? Was your mom there? The midwife? Like, who was the first person you seen and got to hear about what happened?
I don't really know. They all just kind of like come into my vision and like into place all at the same time. And then shortly after that, um, my dad has two sisters that live locally, and they work at the same hospital, not the one I was at. They work at a different hospital, but they work together and they're on the same shift. And they live very close to each other, so they carpool. And like my dad called my one aunt, and she had just dropped my other aunt off, and she like flipped a U-turn, called the sister and was like, I'm picking you back up. We're going to Oshai. So like within a couple minutes, I had two aunts from my dad's side, and then like I don't have any aunts on my mom's side. So one of the like closest things that I have to an aunt on my mom's side were all there. I know my dad was there, my mom was there. My dad's cousin, Her husband died the same day too. So like as I was being rushed to the hospital for my C-section, everybody's like the news is breaking in our family that we had a family member pass away, and we're all really close even though it's my dad's cousin. Like we're from Buffalo, we're the worst people, honestly. Like if I know you, you're my family and I'm never letting you go type of thing. So we have a lot of extended people that we care about. The one thing I remember is like just I knew he was dead. Like there was no, I didn't need anyone to tell me he died. I just like it was, I think from the moment that I was still in the Coit house, like I was still in that room in that bed when my reality became I have a dead child.
So who was the first person to see you, John James?
I think John and my mom were, um, besides the hospital people, obviously. I know they tried for a decent amount of time to resuscitate him and it didn't work out, and my surgery lasted a while, but I think it was them. By the time I got in the room, my mom and my dad and John were all definitely there with him. Like when they brought me into the actual, they didn't keep me, they didn't move me up to mother baby. They kept me in labor and delivery. And they have right across from one of the nurses' desks on labor and delivery, they have two rooms that like don't share walls with other birthing rooms. So we were like secluded from everybody. But by the time I got out of the OR and they brought me into that room, John James was there in the coin cot and my parents and John were there.
Do you know, since you got put under, do you know if they were like basically in the hallway? If like John and your mom and maybe even the midwife were in the hallway, or where were they when this was going on?
So John had ridden in the ambulance with me. So he got there way before my mom did. And my mom got to the hospital and she tried to like park on the street, and a security guard got sassy with her about how she wasn't supposed to be parking there. And he like wouldn't let her. And she was like, I don't care, tow my truck. And he's like, no. So it took her a hot minute to get up there. But I think that like once the, I know he was in the hallway, like when the door closed and then the curtain closed, I know he was in that hallway. Um, but I think they pretty quickly got him up to the room that I was going to be in. And then by the time my mom got there, I'm pretty sure he was in the room.
Was your midwife around it with any of this, or was she dealing with the nurse doctors?
She was dealing with the nurses and doctors, and I wasn't the only hospital transfer that night. And there was one that happened like as soon as everything happened with me. So she like dumped whatever half-assed information they had from their laptop and bolted, never to be seen again.
Yeah, typical midwife behavior. But yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
how much time did you get with John afterwards?
We were in the hospital from Monday night, and then I think it was Friday morning when I finally got out. It was either Thursday morning or Friday morning when I finally got out. And I was there for that long because I my white blood cell count was so high. Um, so they had him in a cuddle cot and I was able to keep him with me the whole time. So we got like a couple days with him.
I'm glad they had that because those are really great. I've heard about them. I didn't know about them at the time, but I'm glad you guys got that, especially staying a little bit longer, you know?
Hmm.
So,
It's really like bewildering. Like that's just such a strange, like I could live, like there's definitely still part of me that's in that hospital room with him that never left that hospital room with him. And I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have that. They were very worried that I was having an allergic reaction to some, or not an allergic reaction. They thought I was infected.
Oh.
So when we left the hospital, we actually believed that he died from chorea, which wound up
Mm.
not being present in any of pathology. There was like pathology yielded no signs of infection at all. So the hypothesis is that it was my dehydration that was making my body act as if it was having a um, infection response.
So did they find anything with his placenta or your uterus or anything?
Um, so one of the things that I hadn't been made aware of while I was in labor was that he was sunny side up. And
Mm.
um, I actually didn't know he was sunny side up until I picked up his autopsy from the medical examiner's office. And that would have been in August 2020. So several months after he died. He died at the end of February 2020. Um, and it wound up being he essentially died from HIE caused by a cord event at
Yeah.
some and one of the things that I said from the beginning, just like on an instinctual level, was that he had been dead longer than they said he had no heartbeat. Like I just knew deep down inside that there was a longer period of time. Um, Something else that had been alluded to me through some of the physical evidence with him when I actually got him out, there was evidence to believe that he had been dead for, we were kind of told at least 15 minutes, but leaning more towards the potential for a couple of hours. And so it was definitely a cord accident. All the medical opinion was that like it probably was a, a while before there was a chunk of time that elapsed between when he died and when he got taken out. And after I picked up his autopsy, after speaking with the medical examiner about it, and she pointed out like the evidence of the cord accident, whatever. Um, I texted one of the people who had been there with me that day, and I kind of like flipped out, and I was like, "This is such a like basic shit. Like you, how was the response to this not better? How do you guys not handle this better than this?" And the person just got like positively defensive, where she was like definitely defending them, but being like rainbows and butterflies about it. Um, and then like an hour later, she was like, "Does his autopsy say anything about what time it happened at?" Because around 5:30 is when he flipped from sunny side up to OP. And I'm wondering if that's when it happened. And 5:30 would have been when I was in the tub or in the birth pool screaming that things felt wrong. And I remember screaming like it feels like he's trying to scratch his way out. Um, so that was how that all kind of transpired. There was like no hope of saving him by the
By
time.
the, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think for CPR or resuscitation to work, you need a viable heart.
Mm-hmm.
The heart can't be too damaged, but you also need viable brain stem. You need both.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Yeah. His like his autopsy, obviously, because he died in utero, he has intrauterine fetal demise as the cause of death. But his autopsy in the cause of death area makes a note to see the physician's notes page on the autopsy. And that's where she laid out like she transferred from their notes all of like his heart rate readings and stuff like that to like paint a picture of how things were going. And cited a lot of like ACOG and ACNM literature about like how home births should be conducted and stuff. Um, it was just, they knew something was happening. And again, it was either confirmation bias that made them think that everything would wind up being okay in the end, or they really just didn't care. And I haven't interacted with almost any of them since he died, but I do know that I feel like the owner, Maura, it's definitely not confirmation bias that makes her make the decisions.
I was thinking about the medical saying, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. And I was like, if you have home birth midwives who've never seen a zebra, they wouldn't know one if it walked up in front of them. And I think a lot of it is, for them, is confirmation bias, is that they can't recognize when something is going wrong, because their confirmation bias says, no, no, no zebra, this is a horse, until it eventually turns out to be a zebra, which completely shocks them because they have no idea what it was. Your story is classic in the, should we transfer, should we go to the hospital, and
Everything's a variation of normal.
everything's great. You're great. Your son's great. Baby's
Everything's
great.
great. Baby's dead.
Yeah, and
Like,
it's like,
Yeah.
well, clearly this, and then they just say we can't find the heartbeat. And in a hospital, that's a stat C-section. We can't find the heartbeat. You don't sit there and say, well, let's try to find it. If you can't find it, that is the finding. You don't get to have a revisionist history.